FEMA turned out to be a disaster. Trump calls for overhaul, eradication of federal emergency aid agency. Look, I like the idea of downsizing the government, and whatever shape that takes, I'm probably going to be for. So, the Post-Millennial says, on Thursday, President Donald Trump said he will be signing an executive order to reform the Federal Emergency Management Agency, or FEMA, or get rid of the agency altogether. During a stop in Asheville, North Carolina, an area ravaged by Hurricane Helene, Trump held a press conference in the airport and said, I'll also be signing an executive order to begin the process of fundamentally reforming and overhauling FEMA, or maybe getting rid of FEMA. Trump was on the ground to assess hurricane damage months after two tore through in rapid succession. I think, frankly, FEMA's not good, Donald Trump says. I think when you have a problem like this, I think you want to go and, whether it's a Democrat or Republican governor, you want to use your state to fix it and not waste time calling FEMA, Trump added.
Well, I mean, does anybody really find it strange, given North Carolina and Hawaii, that people would be doubtful about whether they're able to actually do anything of note?
No, I don't think that it's a stretch at all. I mean, I think that personally, I think that the federal government should be downsized. So if they can streamline getting funds to disaster areas, and you don't have to have FEMA to be the arbiter of who does and does not get the funds.
So who would it come? Like, if it wasn't to come through FEMA, then it would come through what department?
I don't know. I'm not sure.
Through the state instead of the federal government.
Okay. No. Oh, so you're saying not even have the federal government?
As I understand,
involved at all.
FEMA's federal, and then if they didn't have their help, it would just be through the state.
Okay.
So. Yeah, and they say FEMA stands for things like fails every month.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Like, you can guarantee whatever they do, they're going to fail in. I think Trump is being smart here because he's not saying we're going to stop the federal funds to disaster zones. What he's pointing out is that FEMA, like the TSA or any of these government agencies, is probably like bloated with waste and corruption. You see that, right? Like, FEMA takes sometimes days to a week or more to get on the field. You already have emergency crews from locals going out. Plus, once they get there, they sort of get in the way of locals actually helping. And so they end up causing more problems than good. And they were against Trump supporters.
That's true. And it's also a great point. They do take the time that they take, especially in the modern era. Like, it's not a surprise when a hurricane hits, right?
They're like, oh my gosh, who predicted
who would have
this?
thunk? You know,
I've been watching a live stream for 2 weeks about it.
You know,
where were you?
Whether it be a hurricane or the snow that just happened across the southeast, into Florida and places that don't normally get snow, you had warning. You know, it's 2025 and there's a significant, significant infrastructure to predict the weather and predict these kind of things. Sure, when it comes to something like an earthquake. You know, if there were an earthquake in California, then okay, you know, everyone gets surprised about an earthquake. But even forest fires, the fires that California is experiencing, going through, it's not a surprise that California is having fires. They have fires every year. So the idea that you have to take so long to get onto the ground to actually have people start helping, I don't think that's actually the case. I think that you're right. It is federally, it's bloat from the federal government. So.
What was the purpose? I remember the story about federal government employees getting involved and saying that locals couldn't help. Was that something to do with liability? Like, I was surprised by that, but I didn't know any more about it.
I don't know anything about why. A lot of times the jurisdiction, there's arguments over who does and does not have jurisdiction, so I'm not sure. But you had also made another good point, Elijah. The fact that FEMA, like everything else in the federal government, has been politicized.
Yeah, they've been super politicized. I also think that, it's not safe to say that they don't know there's going to be an earthquake, because I'm from LA and it's like we all know that there's going to be. Even an average family has to have an earthquake prepared emergency kit in their home. The state tells you to do it. Your county tells you to do it. I mean, this is common stuff, right? I've been at least in a strong enough earthquake that it knocked my TV over and broke it. Born and raised in Whittier, we had the Whittier earthquake. It was really, really catastrophic right there on the fault lines in the Whittier Hills. Shout out to the people in East LA over there. But that being said, I mean, not only that, but they discriminated against Americans. And to answer your question, I mean, okay, on one hand, I got to support FEMA because there's the most lesbians, I think, in the history of the department currently serving there right now. And shout out to those people who are into crafts and sometimes you use scissors, whether it's in the classroom or in the bedroom. I mean, good for you. But to the rest of you guys, who are out there, I mean, I don't know. I mean, lesbians have not been known to do much more than maybe be involved in domestic violence. So I think one of the main things that I take away from this is that these agencies are about, woke policies. They're about replacing, qualified individuals. When I was there, I remember people couldn't get jobs in departments like this in LA because they were white men. And so these places are corrupt institutionally on who they hire. They're bloated in their budgets. They have slow response teams. They're also discriminatory in their handbooks towards people based on their politics. And you said, why don't they let people go? People do speculate on this. But what I've heard the best theory is that the government, FEMA, is in such a catastrophic position that they have to stop American citizens from helping because it'll make them look bad, and they have to be needed and wanted. So if Americans are faster at responding, getting supply chains set up faster, and are more reliable than FEMA, then what does that mean about FEMA? It should be dissolved. And they don't want that, and they're in a very dire position, so they were trying to stop that in North Carolina. So instead, they just stopped helping. It's like they just stopped.
I mean, the idea that the Federal Emergency Management would stop, right? They would say, look, we need to prevent people helping. We need to prevent the locals from helping because the help will make us look bad. Part of me says, no, that can't be true. There's no way that would happen. But then I also think about this is the federal government, and this is probably the least far-fetched and least crazy thing, that thing that's been discussed about FEMA and how they distribute aid.
Well, remember the X-Files predicted a long time ago that FEMA was an absolutely evil agency. That had to do with alien abductions and coercion between the United States government and alien colonists. But same thing.
So if there were an alien race that visited the U.S., do you think that FEMA would be involved and they would be facilitating?
Well, if there was a crash, right, like they crash in Roswell, and you don't send any unit other than FEMA over there to get them. Absolutely.
At all?
Yeah.
No one else?
No one else.
Not even like the military?
Well, I'm sure that military contractors would be working with them, right?
With FEMA or
with FEMA.
With the aliens?
With FEMA.
Okay.
At this point, under Biden's administration, we were like 1 year away from having FEMA be literal aliens, like illegal aliens, right? And on top of that, I always thought it's weird, like FEMA can't get aid across LA because AIDS spreads quicker in Los Angeles than anywhere in the entire country. I mean, look at West Hollywood, right? So it's like,
I don't think that it's actually
as ineffective as any agency.
Yeah. Well, like, okay, but jokes aside, we do know LA's mismanaged. We know that the federal government's mismanaged. This isn't sort of is anyone surprised? And so what's going to happen here is this is going to be a battle against people, again, believing the mainstream media, taking the establishment institutional position versus believing our eyes, right? Once again, it's like, did Elon Musk sig heil? Yes. No. Did he do it on purpose? No. Obviously, he was saying he's autistic, and he was saying, I give out my heart or whatever. And he's autistic, so you're making fun of a disabled person. You guys who are accusing him of racism are ableist. But the most important part about that is it's like, look, we can look with our eyes. We know what the mainstream media is saying. We know their lies. We know their tactics. And so with someone like FEMA, we just saw them credibly fail and get exposed for anti-Trump corruption. If you're new to this, basically there was a memorandum sent out to teams in the recovery in Florida that literally told them directly to overlook homes with Trump signs. And that's on top of their handbook that said to not hit up white areas or affluent areas first, but help queer and black people first. This is in their handbook. Yeah. So when you have an agency like that and we have the evidence, the media is going to be like, Trump's trying to stop aid, when in reality, I think we can see, well, somebody's got to finally fix these government budgets and do something because these aren't really working, right? I mean, am I the only person who sees this?
No, the problem is, though, the headlines that get to be created out of his budget cuts and stuff like that are too good for the politically uninformed. They'll read it and they will take it as fact without understanding the deeper process behind why the cuts are coming.
I mean, I feel like that's going to be the situation just broadly when it comes to the average person that isn't consuming political content regularly. Like, so it's my sense that your average normie that isn't really read into politics probably spends about 30 minutes to an hour per week on their political information, right? These are the people that have lives, they have kids, they have jobs, and they'll catch a couple things that they hear on TV or on the internet somehow. Maybe they have an X account, but if they have an X account, it's unlikely that they're not really read in at all. So they get their information half from the morning, local news and half from The View, which means they're mostly uninformed.
Or it's like when Bill Burr talks about, when he talks about, well, I think it was handled just fine. And what you're saying is there's a difference between government mismanagement and firefighters doing their best with the limited resources they had to fight the fires. Now, the average person who's not paying close attention is going to assume that he means both, but we understand that he is just uninformed and doesn't know what he's talking about.
Yeah.
I think the larger issue at hand when it comes to FEMA is that what Americans really want is effective emergency disaster relief whenever and wherever it happens. And what we're looking for is the most effective way to deal with it. I think Ron DeSantis proved over and over again that the state was more effective in handling it than on the state level rather than the federal level was more effective. If Trump's going to move forward with abolishing FEMA, so long as I think he redirects those funds to the states who should have a better handling and understanding of what's going on in the state than the federal government does, is the right way to go. But at the end of the day, that's what the American people want. They want effective disaster relief. They want fire departments that promote and hire people based on meritocracy, not based on some LGBT or DEI stuff. I think the LA...
You saw that, right?
LA
that was
police,
crazy.
not police department, the fire department had the top 3 people there were all lesbians, and there's a short video of one...
Hold on. The points that you're making about Ron DeSantis and the states handling it, that's really going to depend on who's in charge of the state. Because if you look at the way that LA and California have been governed, it's an absolute disaster. It's a disaster just as bad as the fire.
Well, they're set up to get help from the government.
Ron DeSantis is the most competent, at least as far as anyone can tell, is the most competent governor in the United States. Whether you're talking about his management of emergencies, or you're talking about the way that they run elections and stuff, Florida is really the exemplary state in the U.S.
Can I put a caveat on that? I'm not going to correct you, but I think what's important for this, because we sometimes can forget that, being from New York, I think you are. I'm from L.A. I now live in Florida, but these are a little bit of like elitist bubbles, especially depending on the region. The reason why I believe we think that DeSantis is the best governor is because he's kind of like one of the only good significant governors. And this sounds so dismissive of the rest of the countries, but when you have states that are as large as Florida, as California, as New York, with these highly populated, metropolitan centers, the ability for corruption, Chicago, right, and Illinois to be there is pretty much unavoidable.
Well, it's a guarantee, but
right. But I'm saying it's unavoidable. And so it's almost like it's an anomaly, and we just haven't seen it. And I think that there probably are equally adequate governors in smaller states.
Articulate that differently. Are you saying that Florida is an anomaly because it isn't as corrupt as other?
It's an anomaly because of the size that it is and the amount of money and the size of its economy. Because it's the size of an average nation around the world, and yet it operates strategically and in such a way that we do not see such widespread corruption that does not benefit the average people, meaning there's no property tax, yet at the same time it's managed much better than Texas. I have a business in Texas. The roads there are terrible. Florida, they're not horrible. You can't get anywhere here because of the traffic, but that's another story. But I think and I mean this as praise for DeSantis, not a critique. I think there are some very, very, very wonderful and amazing governors. I mean, Kristi Noem has apparently managed her state well, but really is South Dakota something that
people in South Dakota.
Right? Can we really compare the skill set and the corroboration it takes with lateral movement to manage South Dakota? I'm not saying I could do it. I'm just saying we look at DeSantis, and that's to show you that our leaders are capable. And I want to say this to not just governors. He's at like a federal level responsibility that when you're managing 20, 30 million, 40 million people, it can be done. And so when we look at Chicago, when we look at Houston, when we look at Dallas, when we look at LA, when we look at New York, what the hell are you doing? Because South Metropolitan Miami-Dade area, I mean, some parts of it, thanks to some of the recent migration, are pretty problematic. But overall, the state is functioning pretty damn well. And I feel like, to me, it just makes me think how much corruption is going on and exactly where is the problem. Because if it can be done there, there's no damn reason why it shouldn't be able to be done somewhere else.
I think that was the point that I was making.
It's just caveating you, onto it.
I think, I mean, obviously, I totally agree with you. I think that Florida is the best run state in the U.S., at least to an outsider, as far as I can tell. And I do think that the people that are running it matters. I think that you're not going to get that out of Illinois. You're not going to get that with Chicago with the people that they elect. You know, their mayor is not is completely captured by the whole leftist ideology, and as long as that's the situation, you can't help but run into corruption and all sorts of problems from the state. So as much as I do agree with you a lot, but I think that it's exemplary of the people. So I was thinking about how in Bush's second term, right, a lot of people said that Katrina was a huge downfall to him, right? Is that even, like, if you get rid of FEMA and you take your emergency management organization money and you push it to the states, does that actually take some of the heat off a president on the federal side if it's then done exclusively through the state, even if the money is coming from the federal level down? I mean, I'd argue
because there's no organization to link it back to him.
The idea is that the
Arguably,
state would be able to more effectively
Exactly,
deal with the disaster. But I feel as though some states are more prepared on purpose and other states aren't on purpose because they know the federal funding would be coming on the other side is one of the issues here. One of the things, too, as far as the governors go, I think there are half decent. I don't know. Is it kosher to say here on here? There are half decent Democrat governors. I think some of us tend to stay in a bubble and we're willing to overlook them. So, for example, in Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro, I think makes an effective governor. And in the same way, how Governor Ron DeSantis was able to repair bridges after whatever disaster. I think on the I-95 collapse, Josh Shapiro was also able to quickly move to fix that disaster.
I-95.
Yeah, there was a big bridge collapse on I-95.
That was in Maryland.
More than a few
That was in
people.
Maryland.
I thought, wait, are you talking about during the hurricane or what?
No, there was like also in Pennsylvania, there was like an oil tanker that hit
That was
like a bridge.
Maryland.
That was in Maryland?
That was in Maryland,
right?
yeah. That's-
He's so good.
95
He doesn't have
95
to-
There's something about
95
bridges
doesn't
and Josh
go.
Shapiro
95 doesn't go through.
Isn't that Baltimore?
Yeah, it was in Baltimore. That's
Remember that? Yeah, the DEI mayor. Yeah, he forgot to get his.
So there was one. There was a. I'm reading it now. There's a collapsed bridge in Pennsylvania that he was able to quickly and effectively build back up by skirting different regulations and like making people work.
More than a few people here, especially, have said that it was insane that they chose Tim Walz to run. You know, I guess we found out later that Shapiro didn't want anything to do with it, and I think that's because they
Shapiro's
understood
like, no, you'll kill
that
my
because
political aspirations.
Shapiro,
Smart.
that Shapiro was a more effective candidate, and that was why it was so surprising that they didn't choose him.
Yeah.
Thanks for checking out this clip from Timcast IRL. Make sure to watch the show live Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. Subscribe to this channel, and we will see you all there.